hand embroidery, you're going to fall in love, I promise. I have taught this class tons and tons of times in person, where you can, if you have a problem, say, hey, help, what do I do now? So this is going to be a little bit different. What we'll do is I will show you how to do the stitch. I'm going to keep doing the stitch. I'll keep talking. Madison is here with me. Hello. So Madison will be monitoring your comments. She and I might have a conversation so it doesn't feel awkward that we're just sitting here in silence. And then as I run into problems that I anticipate you will run into, I'll address those. I will also, since I know you might be stitching along with me and not watching the screen, when I'm about to show you something new, I'll let you know, hey, look back at the screen, here's something new, so that you know to stop and watch whatever it is that I'm showing next. So we will go over 3 stitches today. We're going to do backstitch, which if you have Yoda, he's all backstitch. And then if you're doing bloom, which I don't have a finished one of the bloom, that's backstitch as well. And then, so you could do just backstitch for those and be done. Second, I will show you the lazy daisy stitch. So with that, you could, this does not say bloom, but you could, this is backstitch, this is backstitch. You can add lazy daisies. So you could take your bloom and you could just draw these little lines and add lazy daisies for that. And then the last stitch we'll learn is called stem stitch, which is my favorite. So let me show you on the for goodness sake one. So backstitch, this is the stem stitch, and those are the lazy daisies, okay? Do not worry about if you're messing stitches up, especially at the beginning, and it probably won't be exactly perfect, but when it's all done, you won't notice where it's not perfect. And in fact, as we're going, I'll grab my hoops and show you the places where I got it that it wasn't perfect, and just as encouragement to you, okay? So without further ado, I'm gonna flip the camera, and then Madison will be back here with you, and we'll get started, okay? Oh, say hi to the dreary day outside. Okay. All right, Madison, get us where you can see us. Or me, where you can see me. It's weird doing it by myself. Okay. So you need scissors. And we're going to start with, I'm going to start with 4. So I'm going to use, if you have one of these with the 4 colors, I'm going to use my darker color. So you maybe have gray or black for all of my letters. You do not have to do this. You can mix your colors up however you want. And then I will decide how I'm going to use these 3 colors for the flowers and stuff up here. If you're working on Yoda, it would probably be easiest to learn backstitch on like some of these straighter pieces. So I would start with your tannish color, and we'll just work around all of those straight pieces, and then you can come up and do the green later once you know it, once you feel a little bit more comfortable. And then if you're doing bloom, you only have 1 color, so you don't have to make any decisions.
We already have a question. If someone is watching and they don't currently have the supplies for this, how might we go about doing that?
Are they local?
It says, how do we come get the supplies from you? That's what Beth Ann says.
Okay. You can order them online, and that just helps us track our inventory, and then you can come pick it up anytime today. And this video will stay in the group here, but it'll also get posted to the blog and on YouTube later too. So you can totally watch it live with us because it's gonna be real fun for me to just stitch and you listen. Or you can wait and watch it when you get the supplies. But yeah, come by anytime today, or Madison will bring it to you. Yep. Okay, so let's, sorry, you also, if you were at Make.Do, you would get to use a needle threader, but I couldn't send them home with you. So we're gonna have to thread our needles the old-fashioned way. The instinct is to try to get too much thread, because threading our needle is no fun and we don't want to have to thread it multiple times. So we think if I get more thread, I can avoid that. But if you get too much thread, it's going to knot up on the back and make a huge mess. So here's how much thread I get. I leave my skein inside of the whatever that's called. And I'm going to find the end and I'm going to pull it 2 full times. So that's 1. So you can see it came back to the beginning here. And that is 2. And that's how much I'm going to get. And then I cut it a little longer just so I can and then I lost the end. I'll kind of pull the end out so I can see it later. Okay. Now, this is probably not quarantine approved, but I am going to lick the end of this rope. And the thread.
It's all right if you don't touch your face while you're doing it.
Well, we all know I'm going to touch my face in a minute too. Okay. And then I'm going to flatten it as much as I can. And then I'm kind of turning this to the side so that I can see the eye of my needle. And I'm holding it close to the end. And I'm kind of pinching it through. And as soon as I see some of those threads come through, I grab them. It's 6 threads all wrapped together. So sometimes that happens where a few go through and a few don't. But I was lucky enough that it didn't really split it. And I can pull the rest of those through. See how it's starting to kind of want to untwist? So I want to try to keep that together as much as I can. Okay. This little short part now I'm going to refer to as our tail. These ends, see how they frayed on me? I'm going to cut those off because they will start to tangle up when I'm stitching, and then that's going to make a mess. Okay, so this end stays free. This end down here, my long end, I'm going to tie a knot. I know there's a fancy way where you can like wrap it around your finger and roll it off. That never works for me. Okay, so there's 1, and I'm going to just double it up. There's 2. Okay. So while we're stitching, we want to make sure that this tail stays free. We don't want to stitch it into our piece. But right now, while this is so long, I am going to make my tail just a little bit longer. And I know you can't necessarily see all of that at once, but there we go.
Carol asked, so you don't just use 2 strands? No, we're using all 6 strands to stitch this particular piece of embroidery.
And part of the reason why is, yes, you can use as few strands as you want, but this is not going to come off. And so if we don't use all 6, it's not going to be thick enough to cover the writing. So we want to use all 6 to make it as thick as we can so that it will cover everything. And just so you can see, I did this in the dark last night, and that's not really ideal, but you can still see ghosting on some. It might not be showing up on the camera, but I can see if I look closely still some of the writing peeking through even on my back stitch. So use all 6 for now. Okay, we're always going to start from the back because that's where we want all of our knots and the mess of everything to be. Another thing to get you started, first of all, let's check our hoop. So you want to push, you want to make sure that these 2, the inside hoop and the outside hoop, are even. Sometimes one might be a little higher, so see how now my inside hoop is higher than my outside hoop. So I'm just pushing and making sure that that all stays even. And then I'm going to tighten this. So up at the top, you can tighten or loosen your screw. And then I am going to pull my fabric from the outside to make everything tight. You want for this to stay consistently taut. As we stitch, it's going to loosen up, so then you'll pull it tight, a little tighter. All right. When we stitch, one thing that will help this not get too loose is if we're not pushing our fingers up from the back. So I try to keep my hands on the wooden part, and sometimes you will have to move them and you will have to push here a little bit, but for the most part, I'm going to try to keep my hands here. I also try not to flip this back and forth. So I'm going to start just like how we would write. We would start our F at the top here, and we would draw down, and then we would draw across and around for our O. We're going to stitch in that same order. So I'm going to start at the top, which means I need to turn my hoop upside down. And I don't turn this over and try to find where it's going to go. I'm from the back, poking it up. And eventually, the more you practice, the better your hand will be being underneath at being able to find that spot blindly without having to turn it over. Okay, so I'm starting at the very end of my line. And I'm going to come up. And I'm going to go forward 1 stitch length. So I know that that sounds arbitrary, and it kind of is. A stitch length is whatever length feels comfortable to you, just like how some of us take big steps, some of us take tiny steps. My stitch length is about that big. You can see, especially, let me bring Yoda over again, you can kind of see how big my stitch lengths are. You can go a little bigger. I would suggest not going too small because it'll take you forever. Okay, so I've gone 1 stitch length forward. Now from the bottom, from the underneath of my hoop, I'm going to advance 1 stitch length forward. So the length of my stitch and the length of my space is the same. Okay, and I'm going to pull that forward. And now the reason this is called backstitch is because instead of continuing forward along my line, I'm going to stitch backwards, and I'm going to go in to exactly the same hole that my previous stitch ended. So from the back, I come 1 stitch length forward, and then I go back into exactly the same hole.
So, Joe, what made you decide that you were going to choose whatever color? How did you choose that color? Because some people maybe have 4 different colors and they don't know which one to start writing.
So I did the darkest color for my letters. So either gray or black is what everyone, I think, what we put in all the kits. And then, but you could mix it up. You could do like I did. You could do a color for goodness if you want. So that's how I picked. Okay, 1 stitch length forward from the back, and then back stitch. So sometimes you'll be rocking and rolling, and then you'll come around your hoop like this and go down. And then you'll say, wait, what did I just do? So make sure that you're always going on this stitch. We're always poking up from the back. We're avoiding wrapping around here.
Can you still hear us?
Can you hear us? All right, I'm going to keep stitching and keep talking. Somebody let me know if you can hear us yet.
Yeah. We don't want you to miss out on the dulcet tones of Joe as she stitches.
Okay, those are yeses for hearing. Okay.
All right.
Okay. So right now, this method that we're doing is called the stabbing method. I think it's what it's called. And so I am like stabbing the needle up, stabbing the needle back down. But you can also do this in more of a sewing method. I should have shown this sooner because I don't have many lines left. Okay, I'll show the sewing method in a minute when we get, when I'm not at the end of my F.
But doesn't all this count as the sewing method?
Whoa, yeah. Okay, so right now I'm at the end of my line. I have about a stitch length and a half left if I were to follow my current stitch length and my line. I'm going to make 2 stitches, and I'm just going to extend my line a little bit more, a little bit longer than it is. So you can take creative license with your hoop. All right, I'm going to do 1 more stitch here. And then now you'll want to pay attention to this next part because I'll show you something new. So we're all the way down at the bottom of our F, and we need to get to our crossbar at the top here. Now, on this thick fabric, I would probably be okay to just pull my thread from the back up to the top of this F, but I don't want to risk the fact that you might be able to see the thread ghost through from the back. So here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to weave through these old stitches about halfway up to the F, because this is where my crossbar starts. So I'm going to weave through these old stitches. Okay. And then now when I flip it back over and get started right here, you won't be able to see that ghosting of the thread. So again, this is a place where it's kind of short, like kind of a stitch length and a half, but I am actually going to just make my regular stitch length. So you can see I didn't quite get to the end of that F, but I'm going to ignore that previous line that we did. And I'm just going to do regular backstitch right over it. Okay, see how my tail is starting to get pretty much the same length as my working thread, so I'm going to make it shorter. Back into the same hole. Phew. Sometimes it takes a minute.
Isn't that so satisfying when you get that first letter done?
Yes. Oh, and I love the sound it makes too. I don't know if y'all can hear this sound. Well, you can hear the sound of your own, but like the that it makes when it goes through the fabric.
So you just hopped over to that next O, or are we finished with the F yet?
Okay, so we're finished with the F, and I'm going to keep going around the O. And since the O is a circle, you get to pick like which direction you go around it. I'm just going to keep going. Okay, we'll see if I can show you the sewing method now. I get confused about it. Hang on. I can't do it with this one. Maybe I'm trying to do it backwards. Maybe I need to do it. Oh, this is what I need to do. Okay, so it would start now. Like when I stitch down, then I would go forward a stitch length. So it looks weird because it's around my O, but that's forward a stitch length and pull. So you're not stabbing in and out, in and out, in and out. I'm going down and coming up in the same. It's weird because it's around a circle. But I'm going down and coming back up a stitch length ahead.
Like in the same motion. It's like you're combining those two.
It's harder. I feel like I have to put more stress on my fabric when I do that. I'm going to split this little guy into two.
Plus you get less of that sound.
I know. But I think it is a little faster. But I don't have as much control. So at the end of my O here, I'm trying to kind of come up where I've already have a stitch. And then I'll go back into there. So it looks like a complete circle. You can't really tell like where I started and stopped. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how we will end this off, because I don't really have enough thread to do like to try to weave around and start my R. It's its own little letter. So just like before, where we weaved through some of our old stitches, I'm going to do that now. You can weave kind of back and forth, around and around. And then I'm going to start weaving through. Let me see if I can make this big enough so you can see. So here's the little loop where I was weaving through. And I'm going to pass my needle through this loop 2 times. So there's 1, there's 2. And then now as I pull this tight, I'm going to push with my fingers. I'm kind of trying to keep my hands out of the way. I'm going to push that knot down. There we go. So I just tied a knot, pushed it down by making a loop, passing through it 2 times. It's a little bit stronger than a regular knot. It's like a double knot. Now I can cut this off. Okay. All right, any issues that you've run into so far? I would think if we had issues, you would have told us. Okay, cool. Let's see. What I didn't get to show you yet was how to change your thread. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rethread this. And I'm going to, you can keep stitching. You can give yourself a longer thread now, or you can, keep going on your R or around your Yoda or your bloom. I will use this short piece. So since we cut that off, I have to tie a knot at the end. I'm going to get started on this downstroke of my R, and then I'll show you how to change thread when you're ready. Y'all are so quiet.
We have one person saying hi.
Hello. Hi.
Who says
hi?
Becky?
Hi, Becky. Okay. So I'm starting here at the top of my R. I'm going to do a couple stitches, and then we'll pretend like I'm running out of thread. Well, I will be running out of thread. Oh, here's one thing to pay attention to. As I was starting at the beginning here, and as I'm trying to pull my needle back through, my hand also grabbed my knot. So a lot of times on your first stitch, you just need to make sure that that knot gets all the way up against your fabric, so it doesn't get tangled up in something else later. Okay, so I'm stitching along, and then I start to think, oh my goodness, I need to change thread. What do I do? So here's what we do. On this one, it's actually easier than on stem stitch because I can just turn this over. If I have enough length, I can weave it through and knot it like I just did. But let's say I don't. Okay, so I kind of got carried away and I only have a little bit left. So let's say I like barely squeezed by and I just have a little bit left. All right, so now I'm going to rethread. This is going to be the video where we just watched Joe thread a needle. And I always get so nervous when I'm trying to thread a needle when I know that people are watching. That one actually worked pretty well for me. Okay. So I'm not going to tie this end. Okay. We ended. Ooh, sorry, make you dizzy. Okay. So I'm going to pretend like I'm just still going like normal. So I would go further down my line here and start to pull. But it doesn't have a knot, so don't want to pull with too much gusto. All right, so now I'm going to flip it over. Here's my short piece, and I'm going to pull till this one's short. Okay, so this is my new string. This is my old string. I'm going to tie them together like shoelaces. Okay, so they're tied, and then when I pull my working string, it will tighten it back up. Now I can cut these guys off. Okay, and we just keep going. So I'll finish my R, might as well, and then we will jump into the lazy daisy. Okay, so I was trying to think of an embroidery pattern we could do that would kind of be specific for this weird time in our lives. And so I love this idea of for goodness sake, because I know there's a lot of things to be frustrated about right now, and that's typically when we would say, for goodness sake, blah, 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 yeah. Whatever it is that we're frustrated. But then also if we think about those words, for goodness sake, there's a lot more like positive aspect to that and a reminder that sometimes we have to do things that are for the good of other people, not just for us. And that's kind of the weird time we're living in. So I thought it would just be a good reminder of why we're staying in our homes, why we're not in school. It's for the goodness sake. And also it can still be frustrating. So I'm weaving on the back now to get up to the little top of my R. Okay, here is, we haven't really done anything like this yet. I'm about to go around this crossbar, or whatever this is, the top of my R, and it starts right here up against my stitch line. I find it easier, instead of trying to come up right against my stitch line, I will still advance forward like I'm doing, like there's that little gap. And then it's easier for me to backstitch into right next to that, those old stitches. So I can even kind of go underneath them a little bit. So when I do it that way, there's no gap. Makes sense? All right, maybe this might be my last stitch. Okay, so I'm all done with 4. I'm at the end of my letter, so I'm going to tie this off. To do that, what do, class? We flip it over. I'm going to wrap through here. There's a lot going on now. Okay. So to tie it in a knot, I'm going to loop through this twice. 1, 2. And then now my knot is down there. And I can cut this off. So normally, I still have lots of thread left here. So I would keep going. I'm still doing this color. I keep going. But for the sake of this live video, we're going to jump on to do some lazy daisies. So I'm going to pick, let's see what color I want to do. I think I want to do this. I'm going to do, if you have a green, my thought was that your green would go across the top and look like a stem, like I did here. But some of the kits, if you picked kit number 7, it does not have a green. So you could decide to use your teal, or not teal, like the dusty color like mine across the top. I think I'm going to do purple on my top piece, and then I'm going to do yellow and blue as my flowers. So you can kind of think about planning that out how you want to do it.
Carol says, "Can Joe dance around while I catch up?"
Yeah, but you wouldn't be able to see because I'll dance with my hands. If you aren't done yet but want to move on with us, I should have showed you this. We'll pretend like I still have thread on my string. Wherever you're at, to free your needle up, you can just stab your work in the middle somewhere out of the way, bring that thread to the top, and then unthread your needle. And the reason we do that is so that when the thread is at the top of our work, it's not going to get tangled up underneath as we keep stitching. So if you want to go ahead and change colors and move along, stop wherever you are. You can just pull your, you can even, as you're taking your back stitch, you know, let's say I was continuing on my back stitch right here, I would just pull my thread to the top and unthread my needle, and then you can move on with us. All right, what you can't see me doing is licking my thread to get ready to thread my needle.
It's a lovely shade of blue you got on your nails there.
Thank you. Luckily, it wasn't too chipped. Then I would have felt the real need to show off for you guys and repaint my nails. So a little bit of vocabulary. The thread, I think I've mentioned it, but I didn't explain what it was. The thread that is coming from our needle to our work is called the working thread. This is very, very long. And I'm going to cut this end off. Another thing I should have said as you're stitching, if you feel any resistance as you're trying to pull your thread through, don't fight it. It's knotting up on the back. So it'll be a lot easier to get that knot out if you turn it over and get the knot out before you like try to tug it through. And I am definitely guilty of thinking, oh, I can get this through. Usually what happens is you just get like a little slip knot, like where there will be a loop and a little knot right there. And you can take your needle or whatever and loosen up the knot and it will come undone. But if it gets too tight, it can be really hard to make it. If you, this is easier to see on this other one because the dots are bigger. So if you have the for goodness sake, you're going to have two different colors of dots. There's green dots across the top and there's purple dots across the bottom. If you are doing this on, if you're drawing your own flowers, in a minute I'll do that for you on a spare hoop that I have over here. So this is what it looks like when you're just looking at it, and I know it can be kind of confusing. Here's what it looks like when it's done. So all of these dots were green and these dots were purple. So you have 6 dots. 1 dot is the base, and then you have a dot at the top for each of the petals, each of the lazy daisy pieces at the top. We call these, let me zoom in so you can see that teeny tiny stitch there. We call that an anchoring stitch. So when you hear me say, make your loop, now let's do our anchoring stitch, this is what I'm talking about. It's going to go from inside of our loop to outside of our loop, and all of that will make sense momentarily. Okay. So I'm going to work on these green ones here. So this is my bottom, and then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 around. I'm going to start on this inside one because I don't want to get confused later on. So if I just already think, okay, I know it's this one, then I'm going to deal with that one first. So I'm starting down here around it doesn't have to be perfectly in that bottom dot because we're, like you saw on my other ones, we're going to have 5 petals that are coming to meet down here together. So it's really going to fill the base of this up. So we're going to come all the way through. I'm going to just toss my thread over there. And then I'm going to go back in the same hole. Now, if I were to just pull this through, it's going to come unstitched. And we don't want that to happen.
No.
That's where our anchoring stitch comes in. It's going to anchor our petal in place. Okay? So I go through, up, and I go back in the same hole. And this is where you have to be really careful not to pull that knot loose like I was showing you before. All right. So as I pull this slowly, see how my thread is not behaving well.
Just flopping all over the place.
So I'm going to spread it up out here kind of where I want it. Okay, it's still a really big loop. And part of this is dramatic so that you can see. But I'm going to come from the bottom. I'm going to bring my needle up to that floating dot at the top. Okay, I'm going to set this down because I need both hands. So I'm going to pull this up. And if you just do this really fast, what's going to happen is we'll call these the legs of your lazy daisy. They're going to close up and it will look more like this petal. Okay? But if you want loose floppy petals, you have to do a little bit more work to shape them. So I'm going to put my finger right here at the bottom. And then as I pull this, I have a little bit more control on the shape of it. Does that make sense? Now, don't over design or don't care too much about having petals be exactly a certain shape because it's the combination of all the petals together that are going to make this look loosely like a flower. Okay, so some of these are really floppy, some of them are really skinny, some of them didn't do what I wanted, but when you see it kind of all together, it's okay. When we get just one petal, sometimes it looks funny. So right now, my anchoring stitch is on the inside of my hoop.
On the inside of that flower petal?
Yeah. of my loop. And so to anchor it, I'm going to go just to the outside. Okay. So if I pull this too tight, it's gonna undo all that work we did to shape this, and it's gonna suck it right back up. Okay. I like to work one side and then the second side and then the middle and then fill in. But you can do them however you want. The issue is if we just work around in a row, it will make it look a little bit lopsided eventually. So I'm coming to the other side now.
So we're coming out that same base hole.
Close to. It's not in exactly the same hole, but it's close. And then I go back in. And again, this time I'm not going in exactly the same hole. I don't think I did. I'm kind of close. So I'm just holding my loop. I don't know if you can see my, hang on. Sorry, I'm dropping everything. Okay. But I'm holding my loop tight, and I'm going to get my anchoring stitch started. And then I'm just holding the thread to kind of kind of control it as it pulls through. Back down. Okay, and see, that's a little off center. My anchoring stitch isn't right on top. That's okay. So now I'll come to the middle. So now I've got 3 dots left. I'm working this middle one. All right, so my thread is way down here. That's not where I need it. So I went ahead and stuck my needle up through my hole, and I'm just going to loop my thread over it to rein everything back in. I'm liking the way that looks, even though it's not centered. So these next two might end up being a little smaller because I'm having to squeeze them in here. They might get a little bit skinnier. I think this is one that definitely takes some practice and some grace because you can't really control exactly what everything is going to look like. Sometimes I can use my needle to catch that loop. Oh, and that's that one got twisted. That's okay. It's flapping in the wind. Okay, see how as I pulled, my threads kind of split and that's not doing exactly what I had intended. We're okay. So this is the last one. I'm running out of thread. I'm catching something on the back. Whoa.
Oh, whoa.
Okay.
So if you find yourself in this kind of trouble.
If you find yourself in this kind of trouble, we're at the end of our stitch here. So we're just going to see what happens when we pull on stuff. I felt it earlier and I should have stopped. It's just a mess. It's not going anywhere. It's just going to stay there. That's fine. Oh, but I lost my loop. Oh, I can still see it. Hang on. I'm going to loosen it up. Okay, so it's right here. My little stitch. Let's see if I can save this loop. When I pulled on all of that to see what was happening, it closed up my loop. So let's see if I can loosen it. I'm sure Madison is doing fabulous. I can't see the camera, but she's working real hard for you guys. Okay.
This is the good stuff right here.
Yeah, this is when maybe I should have just started over, but I just want you to see, like, you can fix things. And I don't know. There's not always what's the right way to fix this. It's just do what you can. Sorry, I know I'm all up over the place looking for my needle. Okay. So I've got my loop here now that we rescued. I'm going to come to my anchoring stitch, put it through. And then see, because I was tugging on all of that, remember this one that I liked so much? It's kind of back down. So here's what I'm going to do. Because I want for this guy to stay open, and it's not wanting to. See, I want kind of both of these to kind of stay open like this. I'm going to put a little anchoring stitch right here. over these two. You could totally do that. I could even do an anchoring stitch because this got twisted. I could do an anchoring stitch to hold that down too. But I'm just going to do one on this one side. So I'm going to come up on this petal. And then I'm going to push. So I'm grabbing with my needle, I'm grabbing these threads and pushing them in and going down on the other side of them. So now, ta-da, they're married. Let's go ahead and do this side too, so I'm coming up on this side. And then I'll grab this other guy and go down. So you can do those, okay, to kind of hold everything in place if you want. But it's also going to bring it flat. And sometimes I like that stuff looks airy.
Carol says, I'm lost on making the loops. So do you think we could do another set of loops maybe?
Yeah, I will actually do some small loops so you can see. And like this, okay, this is annoying. So what I'm going to do, because there's so much of this, I'm going to cut it. And then I'm going to, actually, because I need to tie this off too. So I'm just going to tie all of these strings in a knot.
Like you were saying earlier, lazy daisies do take some practice, but once you get the feel of it, they're fairly easy to kind of like find the pattern and the rhythm of.
Okay, that looks better. You never knew there was a mess back there.
Who's gonna see your back anyway, right?
I don't know. Okay, let's say you wanted to add something kind of like this on your bloom. So what I would do, I'm just gonna like sketch a line that has two lines, like it's got one coming this way, and then it's got, can you see that?
Yeah,
okay. I can see it. It's got another one coming up kind of like that. And we did backstitch with lazy daisies coming off of it. So that's what I'll show you now. I'll just do a few small little lazy daisies coming off of a pretend stem. And let's use purple. Is that going to show up enough?
Oh, I think so. Okay. Purple's my favorite color.
When this is over, I'm going to make Madison twirl around for you in her dress. She made her dress. I do want to show you though. This is the fabric of it. And it is a whole dress.
Isn't that wild?
You're going to want to stick around for it, I promise.
Hello, Jane.
It looks like maybe it's lightening up outside. It's been so dark and dreary, and it makes it even more annoying having to like be inside.
Yeah.
And my plants are probably getting really sad.
Is it because they're missing you, or?
Yeah, the sun. They're hungry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Come on. We need to put together a needle threading compilation of you threading your needle.
That'll be the bloopers. Just trying to thread my needle over and over.
There it is.
No, I missed one.
Oh no!
These needles, I ordered them on Amazon. I've used them forever, and I used to love them, and I think we kind of got a bad batch because the eye seems a little thinner. It used to just slide right through, and I had no problems. Okay. I still missed one. I'm going to pull it out. It doesn't really matter. So if you want to use less strands, this is how you would do it. We're going to take that one, toss it to the side.
Bye, Fred.
You did not behave.
Yeah, you're quarantined over there.
Don't touch it, Madison. I licked it.
I'll stay 6 feet away.
You are not 6 feet away from me right now.
We are currently not participating in the best social distancing
Well, we
practices.
are because we've limited. You're just one of the people that I'm
allowing into.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to start at the top here of what would be my stem.
So you're about to show us more loops, right?
Yes, that's what Carol wanted, right?
Yes,
Lazy
she
Daisy.
did.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So Carol, I came up. That's all I've done. I'm going to go back through the same hole, or near about through the same hole. And then at the top, wherever I want the top of my loop to be. So we're about to make these little leaves, so my loop is going to be small. But if you're working on this, you've started here and I've drawn where your needle's going to come back up.
Sorry about that. So you started where? Start there.
Okay. And then you'll come up.
Cool. All right. I want to make sure I caught that.
I picked up the wrong needle. Okay. So I'm trying to manage all of this mess of a loop. As soon as my tail goes through that hole, I'm going to stick this up. So I'm coming, this time my Lazy Daisy is tiny, but you're going to make kind of a bigger one. And then we'll pull, and you can see it forming the loop, and then there we go. If I want this to spread out a little, I can spread it with my needle. And then, so right now, my working thread is coming from the inside of my loop, and I'm going to stick it back through on the outside of my loop. And that creates the anchoring stitch. Yeah, do it again. So if I were making little leaves on this stem instead of flowers, I want them to kind of all be facing up, like not up, like this direction, not out to the side. So I control the direction that it's going to face based on where I put my needle. Like if I were to do my anchoring stitch way over here, the loop is going to go down. But because I want it to come up a little higher here, I'm going to put my needle up where I want that loop to get anchored. And then back down. I love these little, doing them tiny like this because I think they make just sweetest leaves. And then I could bundle some up. I could keep working down. So I'll come this way and work. I'll do one more on this other side.
So we come up and then
back down.
Back down next to that spot.
And sometimes through the exact same hole, sometimes just close to. And then my loop was not in a convenient place. So I'm actually manually putting it over my needle, on the outside of my needle, so that as my working thread comes up, it will trap that loop, and I can anchor it then by sticking my needle down on the outside of the petal.
Beautiful.
So and there we go. And then when I need to tie this off, so on my last one, I didn't really show you because it had turned into such a mess. So I just go back into any of these stitches. So here's this long stitch here, or I could jump over to these stitches here, but I'm just going to go through this long stitch. Sorry, I'm just pulling my needle through. It's going to disappear for a minute. Okay, so I've just pulled my needle through, and then I'm going to go through this loop 2 times. 1, 2, and then as I pull it tight, it will make a knot. If you want to do that again, you absolutely can, but if you intend to keep this in your hoop, it's not like it's getting laundered or going through a lot of wear, so that will hold just fine. You can also put a little dab of glue on it if you want to hold it. Okay. Any questions so far? We're going to move on. I got one more stitch for you, and then I'll show you how to end your hoop, and then that'll be it.
Jane says that she really likes this sort of gray fabric that we got going on here.
Jane, I love this fabric, and we used all of it when
Yes.
we made these bloom hoops. So these are left over from the Bloom conference that I did a few weeks ago on campus at Harding, and we prepped 212 kits.
Ooh, that was a day.
So that is what this is from. I know when it's gone, but it's so dainty and pretty. Yes. All right, talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to rethread my needle with my gray so that I can do goodness. Actually, Do I want to show you this on a letter? I do. So again, you do not have to move on beyond backstitch. You can, and I'm going to use a little less thread so that I have to rethread sooner. So I can show you how to change thread again. You can do backstitch for all of this, but I like combining backstitch with stem stitch. Can you tell the difference in the texture? Like if I turn it sideways, like it bumps up here. This has a lot more depth. And then this is very flat.
Oh, there it is. There's the money shot. So this is the what stitch again?
That's the backstitch that we've already done.
And then this is
stem stitch. It looks like you can see it a little better on the actual stem. It looks like a rope. It is really good. It goes around curves. So nice.
Stem stitch for the curves in your life.
Mm-hmm. That's a curvy stitch.
Oh yeah, wait. We gotta get more of this needle.
Oh,
Needle
right.
ribbon. Hello, Joe.
Okay. Tying a knot.
I think the baby Yoda is so cute.
I'm just imagining when it's quiet, the sounds of all the people who are participating, and it's just like as you're stitching and watching.
I think it's kind of nice to sit and stitch when it's dreary outside because you hear the rhythm of the raindrops and then you're kind of making this progress with stitching. And
okay, so just like when we started on 4, I'm turning this way upside down because I want to start at the top of my G. Well, let me get started and then I will explain more things. Okay, so I start at the end. We're starting like we did on backstitch. So I'm taking 1 stitch length forward. Okay, here's the difference. I don't want to pull it tight, so I'm going to hold this loop. It doesn't have to be, well, okay. I'm leaving a loop down here, okay? I usually just make it however long where my thumb can hold it on here. This is the only time you do it this way on this first stitch, okay? Do you hear me? I'm going to say that again. It's the only time. This first stitch is special that we're going to do it this way. So I have my stitch beginning and my stitch end with this loop in the middle. I'm going to bring my needle up in between those two. Okay, so it's in the middle. As I start to pull tight, there's my stitch, and my thread is above it. Okay, so I move my thread down so I can hold it, so I can stitch forward 1 stitch length. So it's 1 stitch length from where I just came up, which is in between, which is in the middle of my first stitch. Does that make sense? We'll keep going, and then I think it'll start to make sense here in a minute. So remember on that first stitch, we came up in the middle. We don't have to do that anymore because now I can come up exactly where that previous stitch was. You see what I did? This stitch is great because you can't tell when stitches get longer or shorter. And actually, as we're going around a curve here, if we take slightly smaller stitches, it'll hug that curve really, really well. Okay, so I'm going forward 1 stitch length. And then I'm coming up, no longer in the middle of, like there's no gap. See how there's a gap right now? I'm going to come up right where that previous stitch was. I bring it down so I can hold my loop. We're working from the left to the right. As long as we work left to right, we want our loop to stay underneath our working thread when it comes back up. Okay? What that's going to do is make our rope twist. You can kind of can you see that it's twisting? It may be hard to see on this dark color.
There's some of it, yeah.
But that it's making it look like it's twisting one way. If I were to all of a sudden bring my needle up, let me do it wrong. But I'm holding my thread. So if I were to bring my needle under my loop, it's gonna interrupt the twist of my rope. So we want it to always stay on that same side. I'm going to do a couple more stitches, then I'm going to flip this over so you can see what's actually happening, and it might help it make a little bit of sense. Coming back right in the middle. Okay, so from the back, here's what we just have been stitching. What does it look like?
There we go.
What does it look like, class? Who knows? It looks like backstitch, okay? So see how it is flat and perfect, just like backstitch, okay? So this is the back of our backstitch, and sometimes it will look like stem stitch, and sometimes it'll look a little crazy. And the reason is because we're not paying attention to which side of the loop the needle is on.
You can see some of that lovely twist that's going on right here.
Yeah. So let me, sometimes that'll help it make sense of what I mean when I'm talking about coming back up in the middle of the stitch. So here's where we would be advancing forward. Okay, I'm going to flip it back over so you can see that, hey, that is backstitch. But I can't pull this tight because then if I were to go, remember on backstitch, we would go back in right there. If I'm not paying attention, I don't know which side of the loop my needle would end up on. But I'm going to go ahead and stick that through. I'm not pulling anything tight so that I can flip it over. And here's my loop.
Yeah, your needle is stuck right there at the end.
And my needle's exactly where we want it to be. This is my tail. Sorry, don't be confused. My needle's exactly where I want it to be. So hopefully that kind of helps it make sense. We're still working backstitch. So now I'm going forward, and then I'm going back, like on backstitch, into that last stitch. So this is just the opposite side of backstitch. This is my favorite stitch. It is very versatile. It looks fancy, but it's really not any more complicated than backstitch. It goes around cursive really nice. It gives texture. I love it. So if we were to, remember we're doing the stabbing method now. If we were to stitch this one, I would go forward and pull it back right through the same hole. And then it just always stays on top. What? Oh, sorry guys, I bumped you. So I'll do that a couple more times. So I would go in and back. So it kind of makes a little more sense to sew on this way. Maybe it does make it a little bit easier.
But again, you miss out on that lovely sound effect.
Yeah. Okay, I'm coming to the end of my G. Well, not the end of my G, but the end of what will be this line. So I don't have room to do another stitch. So here's how we end stem stitch, because on backstitch, we'd be done. So if this was backstitch, we'd be done. We'd tie a knot, but our thread is on this side. So what do? I'm going to come forward the teeny tiniest stitch length. So it's not a full stitch length. It's just a little bit forward. And then when I pull this down, it gives me a nice finished point. So see how it looks like it's just rolling right into the fabric there. Okay, we're gonna work down this way. This is the last couple things I'll show you. I'm gonna show you how to keep going down, and then I'll change my thread, okay? So just like on the back stitch when I was doing the R, and I said I like to start down low, we still have to do that first stitch like we did at the very beginning over here, but we're gonna do it backwards. We can't come back up at the top because that stitch would come undone. So I'm just advancing down my line. Okay. I'm going to go backwards to the top of my G. And then we don't have, save my loop here. We don't have a previous stitch to go into, so we have to split this one in half. Remember that first one, we split in half, and then after that, go down. Now no more worrying about halves because, sorry, my thread is getting short. I'm going back up through where that previous hole was.
So whenever we start a new line, we need to make that first special stitch.
Yes, but oftentimes, pretty much always, you'll be working it backwards. So you'll start down and you'll work back into the top of the letter. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to change my thread. So to do that, I'm going to start with my loop and I'm going to put this down. And I'm going to leave my loop, but I'm going to pull my thread off my needle. Okay. So I've got a loop. It's getting twisted because it's worked a lot. And so from the back, I just have this extra strand here. Now, instead of making you wait for me to thread my needle, I'm going to grab, where did it go? The one you just took off. Oh, right here. Okay, so this is black thread, but that's okay. It's already threaded. Oh, and I just tied a knot in. Okay. So now, magically, I have rethreaded my needle. So from the front, we're going to act like we haven't done anything. I'm going to act like I don't have new thread. So I would be coming up right here normally. Yep. So I start to pull that through, and then there's the knot I accidentally tied in it. So now from the back, I've started to pull that through. Now I can pull this one tight. That's going to tighten my loop up on the front. And I can tie these two guys together. And that's the same way that we changed it earlier. It's just that it's a little bit more confusing because you have that loop to think about. But it actually might help that this is in two different colors. So you can see now I've pulled this tight, but what we want to check on is that our working thread is still on top of that loop. As long as I'm working left to right, so I can turn this around any way I want, but as long as I'm working left to right, so see if I were to start here, I'd be working right to left, so it will be backwards. So as long as I'm working left to right, I can turn my hoop and my rope will stay the same, as long as my working thread stays on top of my loop. Hopefully I didn't confuse you any. Hopefully you're all still with me. So let Madison know in the comments if I just confused everything. While you're letting her know that, I'm going to jump in and show you how to finish it. Oh, so here would be a good example of, like, let's say I wanted to move on to a different color. I could just pull this up and like let this hang, and then I can change colors and do whatever. So we won't do this. I've already taught this you both backstitch and stem stitch, but it's your choice what you want to do up across the top here. Stem stitch, backstitch, totally up to you. You can add little lazy daisy leaves along if you want. You can embellish these however you like. Okay, so to finish, if you want this to stay in your hoop, which I like leaving them in my hoop and displaying them in the hoop. So you can do that. You can take it out. You could sew it into a pillow. You could frame it. You could do whatever you want with this. But if you want to leave it in the hoop, you will take scissors and you're going to cut about an inch away, a couple inches away. We just want to cut all this excess off. You don't have to measure it. You just want it to look about like that. Or if you have Bloom or Yoda, yours is going to look like this. You don't have to cut these straight edges at all. All you're going to do is cut the cut these curves. Well, and of course these are not fabric scissors, so they don't want to cut this. but actually maybe that's perfect. Okay, so see, I was not precious about it. I just cut those.
Just lopped it right off.
Okay. So then you're gonna get a good amount of thread, 2 pulls again. I already started this because it takes a little bit and I didn't want you to get bored while you were watching me do this. So I tied a knot in this end, okay? And I've done a running stitch all the way around. So in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. I'll keep doing it now so you can see what I mean by running stitch. Also, the side that's knotted is on the right side of my fabric, right? So it started here instead of being underneath like we did before. So I'm just gonna go in and out. And these I actually do sew instead of stab, typically. In and out.
Doesn't matter how big the stitches are.
I would make them about, hang on, let me pull that there. So you can see about how big mine are. This one is a little on the big side. But they're what, an inch?
Yeah, about an inch.
So we want to do it quickly. And as like my thread is about to start getting a little too short. So it's going to gather already. We're making a gathering stitch here is what we're doing. So here's the part that will be so helpful. Let me just waffle while I do one more stitch. Okay, so if I were to stop here, let me get this out. Come on, come on. Okay, so the ring is in the way. But okay, here's where I started. Here's where I ended. They're a stitch length away. If I were to stop here, it would be like the cheap drawstring pants where the drawstrings don't cross each other and it's always hard to get them tight like we want, okay? So instead of stopping here where my beginning and my end are still a stitch length away, I'm gonna take one more stitch. So I'm gonna go back down and then I'm gonna come, sorry, I got tangled up. I'm gonna go back down and then I'm going to come back up on, come on, participate, people. Okay. And then I'm going to come back up on the other side of my beginning thread. And I can unthread my needle once I'm there. So I've let these cross over, and that's going to help us get a really nice tight knot. Like when you have the fancy drawstring pants, where inside of your pants, those threads cross. And then when you tie it, it stays nice and tight. Okay, so now when I start to pull this, I'm gonna flip this over, and as I pull these, that's my favorite part. I love it.
How pretty.
And so now, since I crossed those 2 ends, when I pull this, as I tie my knot and pull these away from each other, it's self-tightening. See how it stayed tight? And if I hadn't done that, when I pulled these and then loosened the tension to tie it again, that would have loosened. And then I would be like, can you please put your finger here and hold this tight? So,
there's so many satisfying things about hand embroidery.
oh, so I can pull that tight. So the closer, I showed you like how close to cut your fabric. If you get too close, this is going to be, it might not be come inside enough. So giving yourself a little bit more room just would make this come in a little bit more. Like Yoda. See how the inside here is a lot skinnier than this. So it just kind of closes it in a little bit more. If you don't cut off your corners, then all of this will have a bunch of extra fabric. Okay? But from the front, you can't really tell the difference.
Ooh, so clean.
All right.
So we have one more question. If we didn't get a kit, will we be making the bloom instead of the goodness sake?
There's still goodness sakes left.
Oh, yes, there are. Which they're super cute. Plus, you get a choice of lots of different color combinations, expertly picked out. So,
is that everything?
I think so. We finished our hoop. We learned the lazy daisy, the stem, backstitch, and yeah, so think that's about it.
Let me see your faces again. Well, your
see those
faces are, I'm so happy to see your faces. So just like yesterday, post when you're done. I want to see it. And if you post it in the comments of this video, not everyone will see it. So just post it, like make a post in the group. Here is a challenge that I give to everybody who comes and takes a class at Make.Do. When you have this displayed in your house and someone says, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Where did you get that? And you say, well, I made it. And then that person, sorry, Madison was telling me I had lipstick on me. Is this gone?
You good.
Okay. So you say, thanks, I made it. And then that person says, really, you made that? That's amazing. Here's where the challenge comes in. You say, thank you. And then mean it. So a lot of times it's natural for us to be like, ugh, well, but, and we start to point out our mistakes and we say, look at this lazy daisy. It like got all fluffy and I don't like it. Don't point out your mistakes. Take the compliment. Be proud of what you are doing. You're learning something new, most likely. So it's not going to be perfect, and perfection is never the goal. And I think when people give us compliments and we say thank you, it doesn't mean that we think what we did was perfect. And when we can be proud of ourselves, it gives people permission to be proud of themselves too. So say thank you. Be proud of yourselves. Post in the group. I want to see all of your quacky creations for today. If you have multiple kits, do them all. I want to see them all. Tomorrow we are doing cardboard loom weaving. I will post a video this evening, maybe live, maybe not, on how to set up your cardboard loom. And I will also tell you all of the supplies that you need. It can pretty much be done with found objects that you already have around your house, especially if you live in a craft inclined household. So you probably won't need anything from Make.Do, but if for some reason you say, wait, I don't have whatever, let me know and you can come by and grab whatever you need. So I'm so glad that you guys are here. This is oddly fun, and you being here live, I know this was a long one and people came in and out, which is totally fine. But it just feels almost like things aren't so different. So keep posting. We'll keep posting. I'm coming up with stuff for next week too. And
Ooh, can I twirl for people?
yes, let me here, give me the camera.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you people ready for this?
We're ready. Twirl for us. Look at that dress she made.
Hey, I made this.
Can you believe it? All right, on that note, Madison will twirl us out. Bye.